What was your favorite TV show back in the old days?
Well, when I was in high school, that's when TV first started. And I like to watch some of the quiz shows. I don't remember the names, but those were my favorites.
Did you listen to old radio dramas?
Yes, especially on Saturdays. They had all the Let's Pretend shows, and they would have fairy tales, and that was an exciting time for a young person.
What do you consider the greatest invention of your lifetime?
Probably the modern day telephone. I remember when we used to have to turn the crank and make the longs and the shorts and go through an operator, and then you would have many people on your line listening to what you said.
All right, last question. What is your favorite music?
Classical. I love classical music and orchestra. Violins especially. They're so beautiful.
Okay, that was my last question.
Okay, now I just start. I have my notes here. My name is Myrtle May Ringer Munns. I was born into a family of 8 children, and I am the youngest. My oldest sister, Minnie, was already married and had a child before I was born. So I have a niece who is older than I am, and that doesn't happen too often. My mom's name was Ida Emma Martha Sharnico, and my dad's name was George Elias Ringer. One of the first places I remember living was in a farmhouse outside of Malacca, Minnesota. It was a big white house, and we had a large inside stairway that went up to the bedrooms. Downstairs, we had a very large kitchen with a pump and a big window that looked out over the farm buildings. And we had a big living room combination and 1 bedroom. And then we had many outbuildings, including the outhouse, which, of course, I grew up with. Actually, through my whole school life, I did not have a house with a bathroom in. I remember in 2nd grade, especially, I remember the one-room school I went to. We had a big stove where we could put soup on or hot dishes and keep them warm for our lunch. My sisters also went to this school. We were driven there by my brother usually, or another farm neighbor. And we took our lunches in a syrup pail. And my mother was never one to send milk along because we never drank milk in our house, even though we had dairy cows. And I saw some of the other kids were drinking milk, so one day I said, "Mom, why don't I get some milk in my lunch pail?" And she said, "Well, okay." But what she did was put it in an old in a cough syrup bottle, so that when I tasted the milk, it tasted like cough syrup. And I never had her send milk again. And to this day, I don't care for milk. One of the things we did in this country school, we always had a big Christmas program where all of the kids would have a role to play, and we would have costumes. And one in particular, I remember I wore a pair of someone's overalls with the big buckles on and the straps. And I just thought that was so fun. And while we were there, my brother Bud, who was my 2nd oldest brother, worked in another town, and one weekend he brought a goat home, a little white goat. And I immediately fell in love with that goat, and I called her Nanny. And she was my good friend, and we set up a little teeter board, a board over a barrel, and she learned how to teeter-totter with me. And that was so much fun. And then I'll tell you a little story about this goat. A few years later, we moved to a farm outside of Rush City, Minnesota. and we lived there for a few years. But my dad was not a good farmer, and even though he rented the land, he could not make a go of it. So he got a job in town at a lumber yard. But that meant we had to sell all the animals, including my goat. And that was my first real experience with grief, when I had to get rid of that goat. That was so sad. And when we lived on the farm, my dad would go to many auctions, and usually he would bring everything home in a great big quilt. And so when he came in with this big bundle, we just were so excited because we couldn't wait to see what was inside of this quilt. And there would be tools and clothes and maybe a toy. And since we didn't have much money, there wasn't money to buy fabric. So my mom would take apart these clothes that my dad bought at auction and remake them into clothes for us. And that was really exciting too, because she was a marvelous seamstress. Then, as I said, in the 4th grade, we sold our farm and I moved to town. And that was quite an experience because I had never been in a room with just one grade. And when the teacher had a lesson on flashcards with math, I was completely at a loss because although I was a good reader by the 4th grade, I had very little math knowledge. And so I was put in the lowest math group. And this did not set well with me. So I went home with my flashcards and I worked and I had my sisters help me with those. And the next time we had a flashcard lesson, I was near the top of the class and I was so happy. And I suppose because I wasn't good at math, I couldn't tell time. So I didn't know if it was recess or if it was lunchtime. And many times I was out playing on the swings and a friend would say, you know, it's lunchtime, you should be going down to the lunchroom. So then I'd have to hurry and get my lunch and run to the lunchroom. And the same with recess. Sometimes I should be in lunch and I'd be running out to the playground and someone would have to tell me. But I finally overcame that too, and I learned how to tell time. And then when we moved to another home on a couple of acres, and that was next door to a fairgrounds. And in this fairgrounds, there was a big round pavilion. And a man from town named Moulton decided to start a roller rink in this pavilion. And he bought a bunch of old roller skates and got a phonograph hooked up. And soon that was just the hit of the town. We would be there every week going round and round in this roller rink. After a few years, it was quite a success, so he built another roller rink, but about 4 times the size of that. And he built a floor, and he put a big tent over it, and he had bathrooms and much better skates. And so all through high school, this was what I and my friends did. We roller skated. And we also went to all the sports events. And at that time, there were only boys' sports, of course, nothing for girls. So we went to the football games and the basketball games and the track. And then after that, we would all gather at a restaurant called the Coffee Cup. And if you had a boyfriend, you would pair off with him, or otherwise you just paired off with a girlfriend or big groups of kids. And there were 31 students in my class. And to this day, we still keep in contact, most of us. And once a year, we meet for lunch, and there are about 17 or 18 students who come every year. So I can say I had just a wonderful experience in school. I loved it, and it was a great time.
Excellent.
That's it.
Sweet.